It is in our soul, in our DNA, to crave adventure, to seek out forgotten lands, mysterious valleys, and mountain ridges that go forever. We belong to open spaces, to fresh air, to the wind and the weather. In our modern, safe, and predictable lives, we have lost touch with this part of ourselves. The freedom of two wheels delivers us to a better mental and physical space. We look to adventure motorcycles as an escape from our boring everyday life. Load up camping gear and head for the desert, the mountains, for the horizon, and for the unknown. Problem is, many adventure bikes have been more about projecting an image of adventure rather than actual off-road ability. For too many years, we've been held back by manufacturers taking street bikes and throwing on long travel suspension and plastic handguards. That day is over.
Hey guys, Ian from Big Rock Moto and Outdoors. Today I have a real treat for you guys. I'm doing a test of the KTM 790 Adventure R. So I've never ridden a 790 before. This is my first time on this platform and I'm super excited about it. First thing, I got to give a huge shout out to AEO Power Sports here in Marietta, California. I have bought a bike from them before. I bought a 500 from them. I'm not sponsored by them or anything, but they're letting me take the 790 out for a couple hours and do a test on it, and very grateful to them for that. So like I mentioned, this is my first time on the 790. I do own a 500 EXC and also a 1200 GS, as you guys know if you've seen my other videos. I've owned a lot of different adventure bikes, Triumph Tigers, V-Stroms, KTM 950 and 990, 800 GS, Africa Twin, all sorts of things. So super excited to get on this thing and see how it goes on and off the road. We're going to do some freeway, we're going to do some dirt, we're going to do some twisty roads. And a few things I noticed right away just riding this around the parking lot is just how light it feels. And I know everyone says that, but it really is true on this bike. I think because the weight and the mass is really low on the bike, they've got the saddle fuel tank down here, that helps a lot. Also, the bike's only 470 pounds fully fueled up. Now I say only because that's pretty light for an adventure bike. You know, my GS is 540 pounds fueled up, and then it's got crash bars and all sorts of crap on it, so it's probably 560 pounds. So this thing feels like a damn bicycle compared to my GS. So I don't know, my GS might be in trouble after I ride this thing, but we'll see. So this is the R model. It's not the Rally, it's not the super special Rally one, but this is the R, which most off-road guys are going to get. So it's got longer travel WP Explorer fork and things like that. So we're going to be playing with the electronics, the rally mode, the different ride modes. We're going to see how the wind protection is, we're going to see how the seat is, and we're just going to go have some fun with this thing. So stay tuned. Okay, so let's get started on the 790. So I've got the ignition turned on. One of the first things I noticed is how clear and bright this TFT screen is. Really nice, really visible in the daylight. I already kind of like this TFT right off the bat. I'm a little surprised it's not bigger. In my mind I kind of thought it was going to be a little bit larger, but it's big enough. So we're going to start out in street mode. So there's street, rain, off-road, rally, and of course you can adjust ABS and traction control independently of those. But we're going to start out in street mode, so we're going to have the ABS on, traction control and everything's going to be on. And when we get to the dirt, we're going to put it in rally mode, and then we're going to use the 1 through 9 traction control settings in the rally mode to see how that works. Okay, so got some street miles on this thing. I'm already having a blast. It's just too much fun. KTM really knows how to make a fun motorcycle. A few things I noticed right away. The engine is much smoother than I thought. For a parallel twin, there's like no vibration. Really great job on the engine. Really fun, sporty. On the freeway, I did notice quite a bit of wind buffeting, wind noise. And that makes sense. That's what I expected because the windshield and fairing is pretty minimal on this bike. But you can live with that or work around that. But it's not a gold wing, you know, so just keep that in mind. One thing I had been worried about was sort of low RPM fueling. I'd read that some riders said that it didn't really like to be lugged down low. So what I did was I started off in second gear and just opened the throttle, and you know what? The computer figured it out. It was fine. So that concern is kind of mitigated there. So we're about to hit the dirt and keep having some fun on this thing. You know what? The power to weight ratio is really good on this because the bike's pretty light for what it is. So with 95 horsepower, the power to weight ratio is probably kind of similar to my GS. So it feels faster than I thought. So riding modes, you've got street, rain, off-road, rally. We're just gonna go right into rally. Okay, so we're in rally mode, which means we have the adjustable traction control here. You can also change the throttle response in rally mode. So I can have street, rally, off-road. I think, well, we'll go ahead and leave it in rally and see how that goes. Okay, so now that we're in rally mode, basically the ABS, oh, you know what? We need to set the ABS to off-road because I need to turn off the rear ABS, so we'll do that. So now when I'm in the regular mode, I can use the buttons here to change my how much traction control I want. So I'm going to start off in you know, 2, which is not much intervention, and then start dialing it up. So let's go. This is going to be a very, very expensive test ride. Stuff like this bike is just incredible, and you can ride as fast as you want. The suspension soaks everything up. The traction control is amazing. The brakes modulate really well for the dirt. I can slide this thing around like a dirt bike. I mean, you're not going to go into super technical single track stuff with this, but that's not what it's made for. It's made for big open rides, big adventure rides, dirt roads, fire roads, Jeep roads, going long distances, hitting the street, hitting the highway. And I don't think there's a better bike out there than this thing, and that's what everyone else has said, and I have to agree with them. Of course, you do have the Yamaha T7, which is out now, so if anyone has a T7 they want to let me borrow, let me know. I'd be happy to compare it to this bike. So I find that the I've got the traction control in 5. I kind of like that setting. It's about halfway. Fun. Okay, so my sort of day in the dirt here is over. I can't go too crazy in the dirt or take it on really hard trails because this is not my motorcycle. This is a dealership's bike, so that wouldn't be very respectful to do that. But riding down this dirt road, this potholed kind of washboarded dirt road, I felt like I could just go as fast as I wanted. I mean, within reason and within safety. But this thing is crazy good off-road. We'll talk about comparisons to everything else I've owned, but basically off-road there is no comparison between this and most other adventure bikes. So I put it back to street mode. We're going to cruise back on some back roads, get back to dealer, and then we're going to take a deeper dive into this bike, so stay tuned. So I had a great ride on this bike, and now I'm going to tell you what I think of it. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the good things, the not so good things, some comparisons to other bikes that I've ridden, and maybe talk about who this bike might be right for, and this is a good value. So the first thing that I really like about it is it feels super light. So if you've ridden other adventure bikes, you know the problem is a lot of them tend to get really heavy. So this bike is 470 pounds wet, but it doesn't feel that. It feels more like 400 pounds to me. And so if you're comparing this to something like a GS or a Super Tenere or even an Africa Twin, this feels way, way lighter and is going to give you so much more confidence off-road. Another great thing I like about it is the suspension. The suspension on this bike is no joke. It's really set up for aggressive off-road riding. So if you're someone who really is serious about your off-roading, you're going to do more than just smooth gravel roads and things like that, then you're really going to appreciate this WP Explorer suspension. It has enough travel at 9.5 inches, it has good damping, and it's fully adjustable. For someone around my weight, 180, 190, I don't think you're going to have any issues. People talking about upgrading it to cone valves and all this stuff, I think that's kind of crazy. I mean, if you're out riding the suspension, then you're a really, really good rider. I like the electronics package on the bike. So I like the traction control, the way things are adjustable so you can adjust 1 through 9 or turn off the traction control. I think that's really great. I also like the fact that you can add cruise control to this bike. You can add a quick shifter, and I'll tell you what, if it was me, if I was buying this bike, and I actually might buy this bike, I would definitely get the quick shifter and the cruise control, pop those things on there, and you're going to have a great time. I like the ground clearance, and the chassis of this bike is really set up high enough where you can clear things off-road really well. I'll put up the ground clearance here, but it's really impressive. And in general, I just like how much fun this bike is. KTM really knows how to build a fun, sporty, engaging motorcycle. Off-road, it feels like a big dirt bike. You can slide it around. It's just awesome. I think if you have this bike off-road, you're not going to get so intimidated by those tougher trails, which is a big difference from most of the large adventure bikes out there. And that's why this midweight adventure category is so important. So what about some things that I didn't think were so great? So there's a few things that I didn't love about the bike, and some of these I was expecting. So the wind protection and the fairing is not all that effective. You do get a lot of wind buffeting, a lot of wind blast above about 55 miles an hour. So you definitely would need to wear earplugs with this bike, or consider playing around with different windshield setups and things like that. Don't expect like GS levels of wind protection on the highway. It's not as good a bike at 75 as a GS or another touring bike. It just isn't. But that's something you could pretty easily address in the aftermarket. But there's just not much fairing area in the front. But that is a good thing off-road because you get a lot of nice wind flow through your jacket or through your jersey. I noticed the seat is not really very comfortable, and KTM's kind of famous for this. The seats are not that comfy. So I rode for like an hour and a half or so, and I was already getting a little uncomfortable. So I'd probably have to change the seat out to a Seat Concepts. Not a big deal. Another thing I noticed was that the throttle's a little bit jerky at really low speed. So kind of the on-off throttle is a little bit abrupt, and a lot of fuel-injected bikes have this, but I kind of figured by now, they were getting better, but this one still has a little bit of that. It's not a deal breaker by any means, and I think you get used to it pretty quickly. I also noticed, I don't know why the bike has a cable clutch. It seems kind of like a strange thing for KTM to do, but maybe they have some reason for it. Honestly, the clutch has good modulation. It works fine, but I kind of would have preferred to see a hydraulic clutch. And I don't really have anything else bad to say about it. It's not going to be as good a touring bike as some of the larger adventure bikes, but you know what? You could do it. It's passable for that. And when you get to the trail, it's going to be a hell of a lot more fun. So let's talk about some comparisons to popular bikes. So what about compared to, let's start with the big bikes like the 1200s, the 1200 GS, the Super Tenere, ones like that. This bike feels incredibly smaller and lighter. It's so much more confidence-inspiring off-road. It doesn't give up really much performance on the street, except for when it comes to long-distance riding and touring. So for long tours where you're just grinding the freeway 500 miles a day for days on end, this is not the bike for that. You could do it, you could survive it, but you're not going to be as comfortable because the wind's going to be hitting you, and it just doesn't have the wind protection for that. But off-road, compared to those 1200 class, this thing blows it out of the water. Compared to like the 1000cc class, so what about an Africa Twin or 1090 or something like that? So that's an interesting comparison because those bikes are a little bit closer in weight and displacement to this. I do have to say this is the lightest feeling and best suspended adventure bike I've ever ridden by far. And I've had the 800 GS, I've had Triumph Tigers, I've had the KTM 950, 990, I've had the Africa Twin. So I've had some things, and this feels the best for off-road. I feel like the Africa Twin has a little bit better build quality, a little bit better overall quality in the whole bike. The Africa Twin motor sounds a little bit better to me. This sounds a little bit like a vacuum cleaner. The Africa Twin feels really soft, and it does feel very stable and very comforting, but this is so much more nimble and athletic on and off the road. The suspension is a lot more firm on this. In terms of wind protection and touring ability, they're not. I mean, if you compare to the Adventure Sports Africa Twin, that's going to be better for touring. But comparing this to the standard Africa Twin, I think they're going to be kind of similar. So keeping that in mind, if the Africa Twin's not that much better on the road, and if Honda reliability doesn't mean that much to you, then I would probably just go for this because I think this actually costs less. And it has way better suspension. The Africa Twin suspension is too soft. Okay, what about compared to like something like a KTM 690? So a lot of people are going to look at, okay, do I get a 1090, do I get a 790 or a 690? So here's what I would say. If you're going to do 50-50 riding, then just get this. Forget about the 690. The 690 is like a big dirt bike, and go watch my other reviews on the 690 review I have, or the 690 versus 500. But this is so much better of a street bike than the 690 that's not even funny. And off-road, for most off-road situations, this is going to be just fine. If you get into really technical, really difficult riding where maybe you're having to lift the bike a lot or pick it up a lot, then the weight's going to come into play, because this is 150 pounds heavier than the 690. That's a lot of extra weight. 150 pounds is very significant, but it doesn't really feel that much heavier. It doesn't feel 150 pounds heavier, but it is. So when you have to pick it up, you're going to notice that. For any kind of street riding, this is going to slay the 690 because your fuel capacity, your seat's more comfortable. Everything about it is so much better. You've got some wind protection on it, although it's not great. The dash is really good. I like the TFT dash. That's one thing I wanted to say. What about compared to the Yamaha T7, the 700 Tenere? Well, I haven't had a chance to ride that yet. Now, if anyone in SoCal has a T7 that they're willing to let me borrow for a couple hours, let me know and we'll do a comparison. But I'm not sure. The T7 is going to be really reliable. It's going to be really durable because Yamaha is known for that. It is less displacement, less power, less torque. It's 20 pounds lighter, which I don't know if you're really going to notice it. It doesn't have the electronics, and I think the suspension is going to be quite a bit softer than this from what I've heard. So I don't know, kind of a toss-up there, but I think a lot of people are going to be drawn in by the lower price of the Yamaha and the more simplicity of it. I think it's hard to make that decision. I'm going to need to ride a Tenere 700 before I decide to jump into one of these. So who is this bike for? I think this bike is for adventure riders who actually want to go off-road on more than just graded fire roads or graded gravel roads. So if you're going to be on Jeep roads or something approaching single track, or you're just going to be riding a lot off-road and you like to be aggressive, maybe you have a dirt bike background, this is the adventure bike for you right here. Just forget about all the other ones, maybe except the Yamaha T7. If you're like me and you kind of find most adventure bikes to feel way too heavy and bulky and kind of crappy off-road, this changes that. This doesn't feel that way anymore. So for riding like backcountry discovery routes, for camping, doing off-road camping rides, off-road touring, this thing sets a whole new standard, and I'm really, really glad the KTM brought this out. If you're buying a bike more for street use, maybe you're like a 90% street rider, then I'll be honest with you, I think you'd be better off going to like an Africa Twin or a GS or a Super Tenere or a V-Strom. There's so many good choices that are good on the street that may be a little bit more comfortable than this, a little bit less hard-edged, if that makes some sense. So if you're not going to use the off-road capability, I'm not sure why you would really get this. Now compared to the S model, I know they do have the S model or the standard model. It's a little bit less money, but I think the change in price, and I'll put that here, is definitely worth it to get this better suspension. One reason you might want the S model is because it's a little bit lower seat height, but you can play around with suspension settings and different lower seats if you want. But I would skip that one and just get the R, because you're really buying this for the off-road capability. That's just my opinion though, my 2 cents, and keep in mind I have not ridden the S model. So I sincerely hope this review was useful for everyone out there. I was so excited to do it. Huge thanks again to AEO Power Sports for lending me this bike for a few hours to do this review. Please give this video a thumbs up if it was useful for you. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and stay tuned. We have a lot more videos planned. So in the meantime, ride safe, and we'll see you on the trail.